Has the Fed lost control, and are we setting up for maybe a pivot earlier than expected? There are a lot of things happening on the global front. We'll break down that, and also some of the indicators that could be pushing Chair Powell to make a move. We'll take a look deep. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. All right, before we get started, get into self-custody. One way that you can do it is through Tangem. Tangem is a great wallet. It's one of those card wallets. It's very easy to use, works with an app that rides on your iPhone, your Android, and it's very functional. And best of all, it's highly secure. Make sure and check out Tangem. Very low cost to entry too as well. You don't have those high cost of hardware wallets. It is a physical wallet though that will help you start your journey on, self-custody. If you're into crypto right now, maybe you're brand new into crypto, this is the first step, and that is self-custody. Put out a little Bitcoin, some ETH in there. Make sure and check out their sales page. You can get a couple of different versions of the wallet, either the new one, which is you can automatically do an optional seed phrase, or you can go with the classic where it auto-generates all that if you don't want to deal with that. So you have two options to go here with the Tangem wallet. Use our link down below. You get a 10% off as well. All right, let's get into a couple of topics here. The global position right now, obviously with what's happening in Israel, and I think is going to continue to be a little bit of a pressure on the market. There is some things happening, though, that are at least somewhat crypto positive, and this is Stand With Israel. So you can turn your crypto into humanitarian aid for Israel right now. That's been launched. You have Binance also coming in, freezing Hamas-linked accounts after Israeli request. So I think this is good obviously it's good, but the point is that I like that the crypto markets are responding in a positive light and showing that there are a lot of solidarity here in terms of support. So, all right, so moving on from there, let's go over to this tweet from Joe Consorti. And we'll get into some of the macro side of this and why this matters on whether or not we could see a pivot. This is a very interesting data point. Number of people holding 2 full-time jobs just hit an all-time high of 447,000 people. So you can see it growing. It has an eerie line of how it kind of connects to the job growth that has been happening here in the United States. And it's basically people trying to deal with the inflationary scenario that is playing out. And to me, this is where I think this shows that maybe the jobs numbers that we've been getting, right here is a big part of that. It's actually just duplicate jobs, people actually having more than one job. So this is not necessarily a good sign for an economy when you have your population having to work 2 jobs just to be able to make ends meet. That's a problem. Further into this, Kobe letter right here, increasing migration, helping the Fed reach kind of their 2% number. And what they're talking about is a rise in immigration puts downward pressure on wage growth. This will be another pressure on the job sector, which, as you have heard me talk about quite a bit, jobs are one of the key things that are that leading indicator. What we've seen so far, though, is this kind of up and down movement, but it has been downward trend. I think the real problem is what's coming at us. And that, again, will be one of the key factors for Chair Powell to say, all right, enough's enough. We're going to try to respin this up, and we don't want to lose control of our economy and control of our situation from a growth section as well in terms of business. That's a big problem right now as we look forward. So issues will play out here. Here was another data point that I thought was interesting. Current Nasdaq to Treasury ratio stands at 70% higher than its level during the tech bubble. Remember, that was 2000, all right? Look at how far this was. That was the peak of the tech bubble. A lot of people call that the dot bomb. And what happened there was a lot of the explosion, much like what we've seen in the tech companies, those magnificent 7 or so that are playing into the S&P, which has helped grind this market up. And are we in a position where this starts to see a fall? If that is the case, then again, you've got more ammunition for Chair Powell as things start to take a little bit of a turn. I want to go over also from a governmental standpoint. Let me kind of pause that for a second. From a governmental standpoint, and take a look at what they were talking about. Speaker Paul Ryan here, really kind of breaking down the situation in the House and what's happened. If you didn't catch our video on the Speaker being ousted last week, check it out. Just to get up to speed on this. But listen into what they had to say.
Hopeful are you, or aren't you, in terms of a Speaker being elected this week?
I don't know that it will occur this week. I hope it happens this week. Today's the conference. Tomorrow's theoretically the vote. I don't think they should go to the floor until they need 217, not 218. I think it's important. I think 100 members or so signed a conference petition, and they'll probably vote on this today, that they don't go to the floor until they actually have the votes for speaker. It would not be a pretty sight to see them go to the floor unable to elect a speaker. So I think they need to go to the floor when they have the votes to elect a speaker. You've got two, very qualified people, Jim Jordan, Steve Scalise, vying for it. But it very conceivably could take more than a day or two to get this done. But we just need to get on with it. I don't think there's anything pressing immediately that needs to pass. But I think it's important just for the world to show that our democracy is working, that it's thriving. I think what Matt Gaetz and these 7 nihilists did was a total disgrace. 4% of the conference overturned the will of 96% of the conference to fire a speaker for what? Doing his job. If Matt Gaetz had his way, we would be not only in a dysfunctional Congress right now, but we'd be in a government shutdown.
All right, so I'm going to pause it there. And mainly what he's getting at is just so we remember that all of the Democrats voted him out. And then there were Republicans also that took advantage of this rule that is in place. And they're really talking about trying to figure out how to shift that rule. But I think there's 2 key things that will play into an advantage here for getting a speaker back into the House. And I think one, of course, is what's happening in Israel. We're going to see an acceleration because most likely we're going to need to see action from Congress to be able to move on a global footprint, and you need a speaker to be able to do that. So I think that is automatically going to be a big catalyst going forward in getting a speaker selected. I want to jump over to a clip also by Paul Tudor Jones, and this starts to play into how this pivot may occur. Listen in.
You just said, would you want to own equities? I mean, there's also the question of what you think is going on in the United States with our economy, with the rest of the world, with what the Federal Reserve is or isn't going to do.
It's a really challenging time to want to be an equity investor because, again, you've got the geopolitical uncertainty, which I think, come to live with to a certain extent. Equally as much of a problem is the fiscal situation that we're facing in the United States, which is going to require a completely different political mentality.
Real possibility of a nuclear war is there, but our fiscal situation is just as bad. That's a statement. So black swans, Paul, they're not black swans anymore. They're actual quantifiable risks. We need a new word for black swans.
So I think they're hitting on it. One is that you've got some of the biggest investors in the land, and also I think mainstream media to a certain extent starting to realize, hey, there are some major issues starting to brew here. And much like what we've often said in the past, if you look at the cycles that we've seen in the past where the Fed will look at a pivot, it usually creates these major impacts on global issues, whether it's liquidity issues or struggles within the economy itself to be able to adjust to that. That's what Tudor Jones is talking about. He goes further into this, talking about whether or not the Fed has lost control. Listen in.
I don't know if we'll have that point of recognition, but we're going to have the grinding reality that with 122% of debt to GDP, as interest costs go up in the United States, you get in this vicious circle where higher interest rates cause higher funding costs, cause higher debt issuance, which cause further bond liquidation, which cause higher rates, which put us in an untenable fiscal position. Our interest bill is going to very shortly exceed our defense spending in just a couple of years.
It doesn't matter what the Federal Reserve says at this point. They've lost control. This is going to be the bond market talking and setting rates.
The bond market. So what's happening is, and why we're probably going to go into recession sometime in the first quarter of next year, probably because the bond market, simply through supply and demand, is going to deliver more rate hikes because we don't have a clearing price yet for long-term debt. And so those rate hikes are probably going to tip us into recession.
All right, so tip us into recession. Obviously, any kind of recession real scenario that plays out, this is what Chair Powell is really looking for in the sense of, have we overstepped? Now, the question is can they adjust and or avoid that for a soft landing? I think a lot of analysts, and including big investors, now are looking at this in a little bit different light, that maybe it's not avoidable. So still a lot happening. If you look at a tweet here, this kind of shows Paul Tudor Jones' position since 2020. This goes all the way back. Tudor Jones says he has 1 to 2% of assets in Bitcoin. This was back in 2020, May of 2020. And then here in October, Paul Tudor Jones says, I like Bitcoin and I like gold. So very interesting strategies here. And again, this gets, remember, he's done this a couple times and there's been some pretty big rallies. So all this also, again, playing into a very interesting position going forward. Here's Robert Kiyosaki. Many of the people think hyperinflation means prices are going up. It means the exact opposite. Hyperinflation is the purchasing power of your money is going down. So that's a problem. And I think the alternative to that is alternative assets. Those are the things that everybody's looking at. Well, when the dollar goes down and the value of the dollar goes down and you just are paying more of those for less, what is it that can possibly stabilize? And that's where we get into things like crypto, gold, whether you like, whatever you like out there, if you're into NFTs or altcoins, etc. What plays into an alternative asset for you? I also want to go over to a clip here from what Bitcoin did, talking a little bit deeper on what Joseph Wang had to say. Listen in on this one. This is a good clip.
And rates are now at just over 5%. What do you think he'll do? Because he's paused them now. Do you think they'll hold the pause, or do you think they will eventually?
This year, I think they're going to hold. So I thought that they would hike again, but over the past few weeks, you have longer-term interest rates going up a lot. You have inflation printing much better than expected. So I think right now it makes more sense to just hold for the rest of the year.
And how long can they actually do that before they have to start dropping rates, or can they just do that forever?
They're going to cut rates next year for sure. It's just not clear how much they will cut. So I think what they're looking at.
Why for sure? Why do you know that?
Oh, well.
Is that like the bond market telling you that?
Actually, that's the Fed telling you that. They're telling you, we're going to cut rates next year.
Okay.
Yeah, so you remember from the last Fed meeting that we got into, and we air those, Powell did say that. I mean, he was talking about a target. Many people were looking at about 50 basis points. That's a question mark because that's not a tremendous amount considering the higher for longer position. Because if we do get a recession coming in, and if Paul Tudor Jones is right, we get a hike, that could offset the entire cut for next year. So that gets into when would be the pivot opportunity. That's what I think a lot of people are looking at right now, whether you think of recession coming in Q1 or like what Wang is saying is that we might get a slight increase next year. Is that going to be considered the pivot to really kind of start to set things back in motion, at least in terms of a bull market? So a lot happening around the Fed right now. Of course, Sven Heinrich, Northman trader, November rate hike odds are dropping. So that is likely to kind of go in line with what Wang said to support that, is that most likely we won't get another hike coming out of this fall. Other things, of course, that are happening, and if you just look at just in general, stocks during war, it has been a very interesting alignment here, all the way back to Iraq War, Vietnam, Korean, and even the Gulf War, 1990. A lot of upward tension. Some of this goes from the traditional, you get into oil, energy, weapons, etc. Those kind of things play into it. But also there are a lot of other facilities, especially within treasuries and securities, that start to play out in these kinds of pressure-cooked scenarios. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Last up here, this was Chris Bernesky kind of talking about buying crypto assets right now, is counter consensus, as it's been in 2018-19. If you're looking at a long-term investment, be thankful for the opportunity. And I look at it this way. When you look at the worst time, and people are saying, well, now is the worst time to get into anything with all these things happening. In reality, those are the times in which, in my past, that I've always dealt. Right after .bomb, the same kind of thing happened. This is the worst time, right after the 2008 financial crisis. This is the worst time. And the key is you're buying at those back end sides of these markets. And I feel like that's where we are right now. Now, granted, sure, could it go down? Sure, we could see a lot more pressure coming in from global, positions around, especially around the war issues that we're facing on a global perspective. But I think there's some other opportunities here in terms of how this starts to spin positively. So a lot happening out there. Timing is really everything in terms of being able to line up for this. So I'd love to get your feedback. How are you guys playing the market right now? Drop some comments down below. And if you're not in our Diamond Circle, make sure and get in right now. It's another place we do additional content, trading analysis, additional Web3 content, and we also do my own show over there where we drop additional content that doesn't make it over here to the YouTube channel. all you have to do is click the link down below. If you guys want to catch me on X, it's out there at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.